Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. Got my good friend Colin Canfy in here talking. This Colin is our favorite time of the year, man. How you doing?
Favorite time of the year. It's my Christmas, like I always say. I think it's 1,340 hours of basketball coming up from the start of Thursday through the next 4 or 5 weeks or so. So got some games on right now and on Tuesday night, and we'll see who we ultimately play. But should be a really interesting first 4 days of the NCAA tournament this weekend.
It's crazy too because last year I think was when YouTube TV dropped the quad screen on us, which honestly changed viewing, not just for basketball. It was launched for NCAA basketball, but it became those of us who were, NFL Sunday ticket, holders. That became the staple of how we watch sports. So everybody's gonna be quad screening. I know you got multiple TVs up, watching everything. Got the computers, another game on the computer screen. So obviously the most wonderful time of the year, folks. The college basketball junkies, tap in, hit that like button, subscribe the whole bit. This is just full blown tournament talk. Colin and I, as UT fans, we do feel it is our responsibility to touch on Texas. We will do that at the end of this, but we are going to start with our thoughts on the entire tournament. So tap in, hit that like button, subscribe, whole bit. Also, want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Autograph. Those of you, y'all been seeing me post stuff from, the GOAT, Tom Brady, and whatnot, and he's got a fantastic app here. Download Autograph, use that promo code or entry code, if you want to call it, Fanatic24. Get rewarded for your fandom. You guys listen to podcasts, you guys read, articles and content, keeping up with the Texas Longhorns. You're watching YouTube videos like mine. Why not get rewarded for it and get points, which gives you access to what we call true fan pricing? We want real fans in the seats, right? And so making it an affordable experience, offering us, those of us who are members of Autograph, discounted pricing to tickets, all sorts of perks on the app just from being on there. It's a free app to use and consuming our normal Texas content as Colin and I do every single day. We got Texas Spring Ball going on that just kicked off today. Do it on Autograph. It's not deep, and you get access to some really cool prices. Maybe even get to go to some March Madness games. So check out Autograph. Use that Fanatic24 promo code. Colin, let's get spicy, man. We got to throw up some allegations, man. Who's on upset alert right out the gate? That's what people love to see in the first round. Who do you have on upset alert?
Yeah, I'll kind of go region by region. So if you go up in upper left side of your bracket, you got the East, which is the one seed kind of overall tournament for UConn. But the spicy game there, I think, is Washington State and Drake. You got Tucker DeVries, who plays for Drake, probably one of the lesser known names in the tournament, but probably going to be an NBA player or a professional basketball player somewhere. Uh, Both passing the ball and his ability to score can just go get buckets at really any level of the floor. And so you can watch out for a Wazoo team who definitely kind of overperformed this year in the Pac-12. And congrats to them for making the tournament, but have a really, really hard draw there with Drake. And again, Drake is playing in Omaha, which is very, very close to where Drake's campus is, about an hour and a half away. So watch out for that one. I think the real trendy pick in the South, if you move over to the top right hand side, you've got James Madison in Wisconsin. And if you're college basketball fan, you remember James Madison going into Michigan State first game of the year this year and beating them on their home floor. They got guys who can go score, namely Terrence Edwards is kind of their best player. Averages about 17 and a half, 5 rebounds, 4 assists or so. So be real careful with that Wisconsin James Madison matchup. Love AJ Storr, love Chucky, but that could be a tough one for the Badgers. The others that I would look at in the South, actually, if you take a look at the Boise State Colorado game that's going to happen tomorrow as a first four playing game, Florida just lost their center. Really, really gruesome injury, basically bone out coming out of his leg. um, in the
Colorado
SEC,
actually.
SEC title game. So I would look out for a Colorado team who has really three main guys who can go get buckets at any level, and one guy who's going to be an NBA lottery pick as well. If you go down to the West region, you've got a few that could probably happen here. St. Mary's, I think, is kind of overseeded this year as a 5. They're going to take on Grand Canyon. Ty and Grant Foster is the name you're going to look out for there. Averages almost 26-2. Has had a really interesting collegiate career. Has collapsed multiple times. Um, and has found his way from, I think it's Kansas to ball now to Grand Canyon, and those guys can really go score the basketball. Actually played South Carolina fairly close, have beaten San Diego State, and then a couple other wins over some non-tournament teams that were fairly impressive as well. So look out for that 12-5 upset there. And the other trendy one I think in the West is the 11-6 matchup with New Mexico and Clemson. Jalen House, Jamal Mashburn can really go score the basketball. And so you take a look at kind of what New Mexico was throughout the year, expect to be a tournament team, kind of faded down the stretch in conference play, and then went out and won their tournament, which if you guys kind of watch the the bracket shows, actually put them in the tournament and stole a bid from a different at-large team. So make sure you kind of watch that 11-6 matchup as well. Not so much an upset, but Nevada and Dayton should be a very, very good game. I would call that a toss-up in the West as well. And then lastly, the Midwest region. It's spicy, it just to say the least. But the Samford Kansas matchup is really interesting. Kevin McCullough has just ruled out of the NCAA tournament, so that really takes Kansas, a Kansas team that was very, very thin already, kind of ran the team through 4 guys down to 3 guys, and probably 2.5 guys with Hunter Dickinson, his health kind of being in question as well. And the other, I would say, trendy upset pick right now is that McNeese Gonzaga game with Will Wade, who is uh, uh, the coach of LSU for a very long period of time, had some allegations, and then moved to McNeese State. And this is, if they can win that game, going to be the largest turnaround record-wise of college basketball of all time. So this, a lot of people are saying this is down year for Mark Few and Gonzaga. I do think that they have a good enough squad to beat McNeese, but that's another one of the to take a look at the 5-12 games as well.
So let me tap in on where you left off there. McNeese, I believe they go like 8 or 9 deep with their guys in terms of people that are averaging a certain amount of minutes. So they're a pretty deep squad that Will Wade has there. So that's going to be another thing to pay. I always kind of pay attention to when I'm looking at upsets and up the past. Some of these squads that have a lot of guys that are playing a lot of minutes.
Yep.
You know, especially against teams. And this is an insane bracket. This is why I'm also looking at Creighton because Creighton's not deep. They're like a 4-man bunch, and we know that it's the same kind of guy, Shireman and all these guys who have been in Big East stalwarts, right, and very well respected, but they're in that bunch where I don't have them necessarily losing to Akron, but I don't know if they're getting out of this weekend between Oregon and that Oregon South Carolina war that's getting ready to occur. By the way,
Yep.
that's I have some questions about whether or not Creighton has enough firepower with their other guys to get out of that bunch. You mentioned Clemson and New Mexico. I believe New Mexico is favored in that game.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I think New Mexico's favored by 2.5, and I think it was something like of the all the 11-6 matchups that have ever occurred, if the 11 seed was favored over the 6 seed from Vegas line, I think there's something like I think it's like 11 or 12 and like 3 over the period of history. So it's pretty likely that the that 11 seed, if they're favored, um, comes out as a winner in that matchup. So that's definitely one to watch for sure.
I also pay attention to the Mountain West they've been a very good basketball conference the last few years.
Yep.
It's not just San Diego State out of that bunch, and winning that conference, they were good. And like you said, they were good early in the season. They had some tail off. Even a guy like JT Toppin, who was a high level guy out of the state of Texas, who was a state champion, is also part of that bunch there with Jamal Mashburn Jr. and crew. I actually like, we if we start to move into our most interesting teams and teams that we could, maybe some dark horses. I think New Mexico might be my favorite dark horse, out of this group because even as they advance, Baylor and Colgate, Baylor, Colgate, and I know Baylor's young, so that's a team there where they've had some issues early in the tournament the last couple years as well, and again that New Mexico team in that Mountain West group, they're battle tested, and I like the schedule that they've played. Uh, Anything else I'm trying to see if I want to touch on here. Um, the East, I don't know. I just don't see anything that I truly love in the East. I know you mentioned Washington State and Drake. To me, I don't even think that's not an upset to me. Like, you know, where I mean, it would be an upset in the bracket. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but in terms of us knowing the teams, it's like you know that's almost a toss up with the Drake situation.
Yeah.
But that bracket looks almost not chalk to me, but I don't see anything crazy going on. I think a lot of the chaos is going to be in the other brackets that you mentioned.
Yeah, and maybe touching on the Mountain West, I think a lot of folks in the industry and college basketball media have touched on um, how nice it was to get 6 teams in, but how the committee really is on the edge of giving them the respect maybe that most people think that they deserved. You got two in Boise State and Colorado State in those first 4 games on tonight, Tuesday, and then tomorrow, Wednesday. And I think that'll actually give people a better understanding as CSU plays Virginia and then Boise State plays Colorado of where kind of that conference is relative to the Pac-12 and the ACC. And I think that should actually guide some folks when they're taking a look at picking some of these Mountain West teams, kind of maybe going a little further or upsetting some teams in those these first weekend rounds of the tournament as well.
So you actually hit on a few players. I don't know if you just want to hit on one per region that you find of interest, or that you want to hit on in terms of somebody that could make a become a household name. Like as we see every year, these kids that pop up and like the what's my name, like a Kevin Pittsnoggle from West Virginia back in the day. For those who don't remember, who's now a high school principal, I believe. So shout out to
Yeah,
Kevin
I mean,
Pittsnoggle.
you've got guys like that pop up on Twitter, and then you can't forget like guys like Steph Curry, guys like CJ McCollum who played for significantly smaller schools than the typical kind of blue blood names and are still playing significant duration NBA careers as well. So I would say most people hadn't heard of Steph Curry or CJ McCollum when they were playing in the NCAA tournament 10 plus years ago. And so I think there's a real good opportunity, this weekend and going into next weekend for somebody to really make a name for themselves at a school that's probably not as showcased as some of the ones that we watch in the Big 12 or ACC or Big East, Pac-12 as well.
Can
So
I do the guy from the South? I want to do the guy from the South.
sure, you lead us off.
Tommy Naga from Nebraska.
Yeah,
And I
Casey
know
Tamanaga.
he's first of all, I remember we were talking about him last season. This is in our college basketball group chat as the Instagram reels started to pop up, and because he's not just you talk about the Steph Curry, he rocks the number 30, Japanese sensation lefty, who has a bag. He has a bag, and he's a very, very exciting player to watch. A Nebraska team that gets up and down and scores a lot of points, and he's that's a Fred Hoiberg team, right?
Yep, yeah,
Um,
coached by
you
Fred Hoiberg, and they've got other guys too, man. They are a really good offensive rebounding team. I think if they can, the Casey Tominaga and Wade Taylor matchup just in itself is worth taking a watch on. I believe that's a Friday game,
Eight
and
nine
they
matchup, real fun game versus A&M folks.
yeah,
It's
and
gonna be a
they've
real
beaten
fun
some
game.
really good teams this year. They beat Purdue by 16 at home. They beat a pretty good Ohio State team that faded kind of down the stretch and a lot of injuries. And they beat Wisconsin as well, and had some really close games with Illinois, who wound up winning that Big Ten tournament. So I think that's going to be a really fun, fascinating game. Fred Hoiberg versus Buzz Williams, and kind of the old Big 12 with Nebraska and A&M going at it.
And my guy, I'm a big NBA head and an NBA draft guy. Tamanaga is also being looked at. I'm not saying he's a first round pick or anything, but he is one of the guys that I think the last one we had from of Japanese descent was Rui Hachimura out of Gonzaga.
Yep.
He's a guy that will be looked at for the NBA draft. That's again when I talk about his bag, his quickness, his shooting range. He's a guy that's just it's an exciting player to watch. And he's very creative with the basketball and has a lot of tricks up his bag. So that's my guy from the South region, and I'll pass it to you if you want to do Midwest.
Sure. Yeah. If you look at the Midwest, maybe going a few players. So if you take a look at Oregon, Oregon was super banged up at the start of the year, lost some really interesting games that they probably wouldn't have if they weren't banged up. And Folly Dante is a center of theirs, 16 and almost 9. I would take a look at that, South Carolina Oregon war that you kind of touched on earlier. That's a coin flip game, guys. It's an 11-6 matchup, but that's probably around a 50-50 game with Oregon coming off that Pac-12 tournament victory there. Zach Edey, obviously, AP All-America first team. Uh, Most people kind of know who he is. And then Dalton Connect, kind of with Tennessee, another All-American just announced today as well, can absolutely fill it up for Rick Barnes and the Volunteers. So, take a look at those guys. And then, Steve, you touched on Creighton, Baylor Shireman, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and then Trey Alexander is another one to watch for the Creighton Blue Jays too.
So out of the West, and I'm gonna get ahead of myself, but I told you this weeks ago. I got my North Carolina, Arizona in the same bracket, and you know where I'm
Yep.
going with this. I got
Got
my
the
one.
Caleb Love and RJ Davis.
Let's go. And they both won Conference Player of the Year, if I'm not
They
mistaken.
did. Yeah. Yep. RJ Davis won ACC Player of the Year, and Caleb Love won Pac-12 Player of the Year. And Armando Baycott was on Field of 68, which is a great podcast. Go
Love
listen
it.
to it. They've Tyler Hansborough, um, obviously North Carolina legend, um, and then some other guys who have been in the
No, those
college
guys are
basketball.
good.
John Henson's on there as well, Carolina guy. Some old coaches. Um, great podcast. But he was talking about how he's just really appreciated seeing both of them kind of flourish in their own places this year. Where after last year when they didn't make the tournament, there was a lot of internal stuff going on. Kind of shows some maturity that you can kind of go somewhere else. And RJ obviously sticking around and both leading themselves to really high seeds.
I think that's if we have the treat of them meeting up to
Elite Eight.
in the Elite Eight to go to the Final
Yeah.
Four, I think that's a really cool college basketball story, right? That's kind of a movie like screenplay, if you will, where those two guys were the backcourt of a team that was 20 minutes away from winning a national championship and and retired Coach K in the
Yep.
Final Four. They did all of that as an 8 seed, and then they come in as the number one team in the country last year, and arguably the most disappointing team in college basketball in the last 40 years.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. You mentioned the internal stuff that they had, the friction they had within the locker room, and then Caleb goes separate ways. They part ways, and like you said, the growth and maturity as young men for them to both handle their business with their teams, and become some of the best players in the country. North Carolina being the 1 seed, Arizona being the 2 seed. So to me, that's a big storyline in the players I'm looking at in the West. If we want to go up to the East region with the big dogs, the defending champ UConn, what storylines and players of interest do you have there?
Yeah, another All American Tristan Newton at UConn. Have to mention him. FAU, I think people know that story from last year pretty well. Making the Final Four. They're actually returning two. I would say two or three really key pieces of that team. John L. Davis has really kind of taken a step up this year, averaging 18 and 6, and then Vlad Golden, who's their big man inside, averages. I think it's something like 15 and almost 7 or something like that. So, guys to watch there. Tucker DeVries already kind of mentioned it. Drake, I think that'll be kind of a run it through him, you know, in terms of Drake's kind of plan versus Wazoo. And then really no specific player for Iowa State. I'll go coach there. TJ Altenberger has done just a substantial job with, Taman Lipsy and kind of the Cyclones this year. Most people did not have them really in kind of that top half of the Big 12, and they did just a substantial job both in conference play and then going through last weekend and demolishing Houston. I think they're the only team that's obviously beaten Houston twice this year, once in their own building in Ames, and then once in the that final by I think it was 20 plus on Saturday. So, and then one more player in that FAU Northwestern game, Boo Buie, has been at Northwestern for a while. Great scorer. I would say if you'd like to do the Tominaga comparison to Steph, Boo Buie will actually demolish you if you stay in drop coverage on pick and rolls. Averages 19 points a game. They actually beat Purdue this year. I think that at home in overtime by 4 points. So, those guys can really kind of get going and score the basketball at a high level as well.
You know, Iowa State. I want to get your thoughts here because I think I saw they're 20 to 1 now for to win the national championship. I could be off on that. I think I read that somewhere. And a lot of people are with what they did in the Big 12, and we can talk. We can talk. Colin and I can go on for an hour on how the struggle bus the Big 12 was in playing in this conference, but because how elite and dominant that the conference was, and I think you'll see that reflected in the tournament. I think it's just really funny because Iowa State had one of the most embarrassing. And this is going to lead me to my next, topic or segment here. Iowa State, that Pittsburgh game they played last year was one of the worst basketball games we've ever seen in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, that was an absolute brick fest, man. And for folks who had them going far like I did, it was is very disappointing.
And I think that they are one of my teams. I think this is the year of redemption for teams like them in Arizona, in Purdue, people that because you think about it, these guys have been waiting all year to get back. Like they really dropped the ball last year, and I
Yep.
think you've seen that. And honestly, they improved as an overall program. Like this is a completely different Iowa State team, execution wise and talent wise from what they were last year. To be fair, but to get that bad taste out your mouth of what happened, that's a team that I think can really go on a serious run, and people that haven't been used to seeing them play or not really familiar outside of the Big 12, where they really, like you said, the TJ Alsenberger, who name could possibly get thrown around for some of the bigger jobs just with what he's done at Iowa State. I think he probably could be the star of that region as a coach. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Colin.
Yeah, and if you look at Ken Palm, which obviously is very different than kind of what the committee did with brackets and kind of the rankings, the sum of the rankings of seeds 1 through 4 in the East equals 20. So it's a lot of very highly ranked teams in Ken Palm. The South is 41, so double it up. The Midwest is 43, so double it up, and the West is 42. So the East has a lot of firepower in there, and it's kind of, I would say, disrespectful to UConn almost to say, as a national champion, as the overall number one seed, we're going to basically give you all of the best teams. Not only that, but we're going to give you three other tournament champions from the Big Ten, the Big 12, um, and then Auburn out of the SEC. So
I'm
you've got
pissed
you
off Auburn
yeah,
too.
pissed off Auburn. So you've got some really really good teams in the East, kind of relative, I would say, ranking wise to the other three regions.
I think that's why when we were going through the upset part earlier, that's why I was like, I don't like. I was like, whoa. When I started looking, I was like, I don't really the way I saw it with all the other ones you mentioned in the other regions. But as we move along here, let's get to pressure, coaching pressure. I kind of alluded to it with Iowa State. I mean, we gave TJ his flowers at Iowa State, and they're looking to rebound off that performance. I mean, let's just be blunt here. Matt Painter, you are
Yep.
under surveillance, right? I mean, Tommy Lloyd, you are under surveillance. Let's Shaka Smart, you are under surveillance. I'm talking about the higher seeded. Y'all have what you need to at least get to the second weekend and beyond type stuff,
Yep.
right? And so, any coaches you want to add to the surveillance to the
Oh yeah,
surveillance
no,
list?
I agree with all of those. Matt Painter's got to get to the Elite Eight this year, if not the Final Four. The one I think you missed is Rick Barnes, Tennessee. Look,
Ooh,
they
good one.
can't keep underperforming. Anyone who has been a Texas fan for a very long time understands that when March rolls around, Rick does not do his best coaching. So you've basically got another All American, very similar to what he had in T.J. Ford and Kevin Durant. He's got, God, the backcourt with Ziegler and Vescovi, and front court obviously with George Side James. Like, when are you going to do it?
And they have
And
tournament experience. No excuses.
you've got tournament experience, and if you can't go get to that, I think Elite Eight game with Purdue, both Matt Painter and Rick Barnes have failed again as coaches, in my opinion. Tommy Lloyd absolutely on the hot seat, kind of with how they've done in March in the last few years, losing to Princeton last year with a very good team. And again, you know, Caleb Love and those guys should be able to get again probably to the Elite Eight. That's the expectation based on seeding. Shaka, I think everybody knows this, right? Since VCU has been highly underperforming in the tournament every year. They do have a very banged up, basically old Big East player of the year in Tyler Kolek. We'll see if he can actually play and what level he's at for that team. But, they're still a very, very good team. Cam Jones and those guys should be able to go win 3 games. And I think that Kentucky game can be really, really tough as well. But I think that's the other one, right?
I
Calipari.
I
You
think Calipari is number one on the list.
right? When is he ever going to do something again in March? It's been almost 10 years or something like that. Um, I agree with
Since the Carl Anthony Towns team
yeah, Devin
with Devin
Booker.
Booker.
Yep,
hmm
yep. Those. I
That was
mean,
the last
so
group that like really. I mean, I got to go back and really look at Kentucky, but the recent guards and stuff that he's had, they have underperformed severely.
yep,
The St. Pete's, year, and the reason to me, the number one coach under surveillance is John Calipari, and I know that
yep,
they're a 3 seed, and we have Shaka on the list who's a 2 seed, but like you said, with the Tyler Kolek situation, that you have to be fair to that, and you know they go as he goes.
yep.
Kentucky has the most NBA talent of anybody in this tournament.
Yeah. The
They have
talent the talent
potentially
is out of the world, out of this world right now
they
on the
have
Kentucky team.
potentially 4 first round picks in next year's NBA draft, and 2 of them, because Reed Shepard is flirting with the top 3 right now.
Yep.
Okay, Rob Dillingham is pretty much certified top 10. Them dudes come off the bench.
Yep.
I got Dewan Wagner Jr., who still will go first round. I got Justin Edwards, who is the number one player in the number one recruit in the country who's 6'8" and has come on recently. He had a big 28-point game, I think, against Alabama, and he started gotten it going. Who has more just raw talent than that? Of if they get hot, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I think
Coach
that's
Cal.
yeah, that I mean, that's it, right? Is like you've got all the offensive talent that you should ever need there. I think the concern, very similarly to in Alabama this year and last year, and then others, Illinois, is that they and I think Duke as well probably is they're not great defensive teams.
Mm-mm.
And if you're not a great defensive team, just based on what Ken Palm has produced in terms of champions over that period of time, they're unlikely to actually win the championship. Do I think they could go to the Elite Eight? Absolutely. I think it'd be very interesting matchup with Houston, who plays a very, very different style of basketball. But of the top 20 teams in Ken Palm, only them and Alabama are rated outside of the top 100 in adjusted defensive efficiency. So, that plus Illinois, who's right on the cusp at 93, are teams who can also give up 90, 100 points any given night, too, if they're not careful on the defensive side of the floor.
It's funny you bring up Duke and Illinois and the other kind of high firepower teams. I think the difference that I have with Kentucky of why I still there's no excuse. Elite Eight to me should be the floor because I know the defensive struggles and I don't like where they are just a defense at Ken Palm. It's terrible. However, what they have what the other guys don't is they actually have some bigs that can play.
Yeah,
Trey
Trey
Mitchell
Mitchell. Yeah,
can do stuff. I mean we you know how I feel about Trey, and we'll leave that aside. Aaron Bradshaw was a 5-star all everything. If you want to add a fifth NBA talent,
yep,
right? And then they got other bigs, Tiero and some other guys that they have different types of bigs. There's no excuse. We didn't even mention Antonio Reeves,
yeah,
who's the
yep,
transfer, who's their leading scorer, averaging 20 points a game.
yep.
No, I don't see another team that has that many different types of pieces when we talk about a tournament aspect and having to prepare for somebody on short notice because it's different than the regular season. Coach Cal, you are number one on the allegations list. I'm sorry. There's Kentucky fans should be lighting this dude up if they blow if they
Yep.
smoke this because the other thing that Kentucky has that they haven't had under Coach Cal that I've seen is they shoot the ball very well.
Yep.
They're an elite 3-point shooting team, and they shoot very well from the free throw line. One of the bugaboos that I've always seen, with especially the younger Coach Cal teams, is the shooting's always been suspect. Even going back to John Wall and them, or Derrick Rose back in the day, like those teams always struggled to shoot from the perimeter. That's not a problem for Reed Shepard. That's not a problem for Reeves. Like that's their game. How are you going to mess this one up, Coach Cal?
Yeah, that's got to be, and that's one of the more interesting things too on the coaching side is you've got probably five who are great regular season coaches, can go gather all the talent. Right now, you got the portal. Now you can go get, Kentucky. There's no shortage of talent going there to play basketball, but you've still got guys where the expectation, very similar to what Texas was in football for a very long period of time. You got to go win the games, right? You got to go get to Elite Eights and Final Fours, and if you don't, it's a failure. It is a failure for the basketball season. Doesn't matter if you got to 30 wins. Doesn't matter if you won your conference. Doesn't matter if you won your conference tournament. What matters is what you do in the next 5 weeks. And if they have the inability to go do that, those fans will be all over Cal and Lexington and Matt Painter and West Lafayette. And, I think Barnes deserves a lot of criticism in Knoxville. I know Tennessee hasn't been traditionally a basketball school, and he's done very well, kind of with the SEC and basketball and the Tennessee program. But, if you have all Americans and you have talent like you did at Texas and now you have at Tennessee, you need to go win those games and find your ways to Elite Eight, Final Fours, and national championship games.
The only other coach I might throw in here and it's young. It's still early, but John Shire,
Yeah,
who
those.
I like. I think he's going to, he's in that Duke wing, and next year will be the year that he's under the cooker with his class, and he has who coming in that group. Next year's the year he'll be on the cooker, but I also I don't think he can have a. Last year's early exit was kind of nasty in that Tennessee game where his team got punked. I don't think
Yeah,
Duke fans can want to see that again. That's all I'm saying.
no, yeah, they're not going to take to again a very similar explanation that I had with Kentucky and Tennessee and Purdue. Duke's a basketball school. Duke expects, similar to Texas football, to be in the top five every year and to be making Elite Eight, Final Fours, and championship game appearances. I think they've had a really hard time this year trying to figure out what Filipowski is for them, who's a very, very good basketball player. And what gives me a little bit of pause is when Cooper Flag comes in next year, is he going to do the exact same thing and they're still going to be kind of iffy? Or are they going to kind of really figure things out? I do think, to your point though, that Shire's year for the regular season, the postseason is next year. But again, they don't have a terrible draw this year. They'll probably beat Vermont. That Wisconsin James Madison matchup has been a highly picked upset. So if you get the Dukes of James Madison against Duke in round two, you've probably got a pretty good chance of making the Sweet 16. And then you're going to get probably Houston and we really haven't touched on it, but a banged up version of Houston at this point. Tugler's out for the year. Roberts, excuse me, has been kind of banged up in the Big 12 tournament, and they're really going to have to rely on, Shed, L.J. Cryer, and Emmanuel quickly Emmanuel Sharp uh, to make shots. And if they don't, they're not particularly deep either. So they do have a path to the Elite Eight and kind of maybe a Final Four game as well.
Colin, you brought up Houston. That let's just transition right to it. Right. Let's talk who's winning these regions. What's that Final Four look like? Let's go. Let's start with the South because you kind of took me to my point about Houston, and I'm gonna shout out to our good friend Ryan, who will get on here, schedule permitting, before the Sweet 16 because we need to get him to weigh in. Ryan told us, but I'm gonna steal one of his points from the group chat. Ryan told us that and this was a few weeks ago to be fair to him, but Houston was almost matchup proof in terms of how he was picking his Final Four, right? And
Yep.
it's very rare that you have those type of teams, especially this age of college basketball. But that's how well uh, Kelvin Sampson's group had been playing. I'm gonna pick Houston to win the South region. I don't feel good. I don't feel as good about it as when Ryan had texted that a few weeks ago. And reason being is what you said, right? The banged up, how banged up they are. The Iowa State game, maybe they needed to get that out their system, but that was a really bad look. How uncompetitive they were. But my thing that I keep thinking about with Houston is they play so hard, and it's great, and they really get into you, especially defensively. But I feel like they now, even looking back at last year against Miami, they run out of gas. And I'm thinking like when they get to that round of eight, they play at they're always playing at a 10 energy wise, and sometimes that can work against you. And so that's my reservation. But I think that I have to put some respect on them with how good they've been all year to get out. But I don't feel good about the South. Who do you have coming out the South?
Yeah, so you got Houston. I think what happened with Houston this year is super interesting, right? They transitioned really well into the Big 12. I think a lot of people were really questioning if they could kind of go through the gauntlet, and they did a great job, right? I think the number two overall seed in the tournament as a one seed. Um, Great team, but I think it wore them down substantially. Um, it is an absolute war every single time you have to play a Big 12 game. whether you're having to play UCF at UCF or BYU or Iowa State or at Oklahoma or Texas on the road. It's a really really difficult schedule, and they weren't a particularly deep team. So I actually have them very similar to last year, losing to Duke in the Sweet 16. That's when they kind of exited to Miami last year. I think if Duke can get through their you know, first real test, which will probably be that Wisconsin James Madison winner, I think they have a really good chance of matching up with Houston with the injuries that they've had and being able to go score the basketball, because it's likely to be a pretty close game. And then again, if you have to rely on Shed, you have to rely on LJ Cryer and Sharp to make shots, and they don't. Duke has a pretty good opportunity to go win that game. And then coming kind of from the bottom part of that South bracket, I actually have Kentucky, and then I have Kentucky beating Duke. So I have Kentucky kind of coming out of that South region. Hopefully, that answers Coach Cal's, suspect number one on our list. But I
Kyle,
do
you held out on me.
I think they have all of the firepower. To your point, man. You've got a bunch of NBA guys running around. You'd expect a coach with his pedigree to be able to have it together at this point of the season. Um, and I think they match up well with Duke to go score the basketball a bunch as well. Again, that game could be 95 to 89 or 102 to 98, but um, there will be no shortage of points scored in that. In my version of the South Regional Final.
Kentucky would be more comfortable playing in that type of game though against a
Yeah.
Duke. Uh, if for anybody that saw Kentucky play North Carolina, they beat North Carolina straight up, playing that same exact more NBA pace type game. So to your point, if they have to get a Duke, and it's crazy because I just talked myself out of not picking Kentucky, out of picking Kentucky. I literally did because of the Coach Cal thing. That was my only thing because I really like their side of the bracket too of the
Yeah.
teams that they're going to play. But I'm gonna stick with Houston just because of the coaching thing. But I really, 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 that's why I spent so much time on the Kentucky thing because I was like, I like them, except for the coach.
Right.
So, but sometimes we've seen. Sometimes you just have so much firepower, it's inevitable,
Yeah.
right? So let's go to. You want to do Midwest?
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
I'll
who you
go
got?
quickly on this one. So I have almost all of our coaches exercising their demons, unlike I had last year. I have Purdue and Creighton in the regional final. I think you've got a really really soft road for Purdue at this point. You basically got the 116 game, which they should not lose this year. Um, that was just an abomination last year with what happened there. They have a TCU team who, they play Utah State. I think it'll be a very, again, interesting thing to take a look at the Mountain West. But, um, you know, TCU this year beat Houston by one and Baylor by three in double overtime. And I think those were their only two wins over the field of 68 teams this year. So I think Purdue should beat them. That Gonzaga, Kansas, 4-5. McNeese, Stanford, or Samford, excuse me, whoever comes out of that should be pretty easily beatable. So they should be sitting pretty nicely in the Elite Eight. The bottom part of the region is super interesting. I think again you've got the war with South Carolina and Oregon. You've got Creighton. You've got a very experienced Creighton team, but one that's not particularly deep. Um, and then you've got I think you've got probably a Texas, Tennessee, Rick Barnes, alma mater, not alma mater, but
We'll
former,
we'll get to that one in a little
yeah,
bit.
coaching team. And then I actually have Creighton beating Tennessee, and then Purdue beating Creighton. So I think that bottom part of the region is much more interesting than the top part, but I have Purdue coming out of the Midwest.
I'll keep this one short. I have Purdue coming out as well. I think this Purdue team, they when I say remind, I'm gonna say it from a standpoint of exercising demons, like Colin just mentioned. Matt Painter reminds me of Tony Bennett and that Virginia team that went from losing in the first round to winning the national championship the following year. They look like they're on a mission. I like the added experience of the Purdue guards. They were the ones that really effed up that game again in the 16 last year. The young guards, those guys are veterans now. They've played a lot of basketball. Zach Edey's still Zach Edey. He's actually a little bit more mobile than he was last year. So I don't think, like you said, I think it's soft for them. So Purdue's an easy one for me. Um,
Yeah, Braden Smith, Lance Jones is a huge upgrade for what they had last year, and then Fletcher Lawyer having more experience, I think, really adds something to that Purdue team.
Going to the West, it breaks my heart because North Carolina is my second team. But I spoke it. I'm trying to speak this into existence. You know who I want in the Elite Eight matchup. I want North Carolina, Arizona. It needs to happen. I know that the chances of it happening because of these, there's some goofballs here with these, especially Tommy Lloyd. We'll see. I have Arizona coming out of this one. Um, I want to pick North Carolina, but I know they're going to lose because I want it too much, so I'm picking Arizona. So this is totally a fan region for me out west. But I have Tommy Lloyd, another one, addressing the allegations and moving on to the Final Four because that's the only thing holding him back. Really, he's
Yeah.
done his thing in the regular season, and he's doing his thing recruiting wise. It's just he needs March success, and I
No,
think
I
a guy
agree with
like
you.
Caleb,
Uh,
could get help him get there.
no, I completely agree with you. And it's funny enough, I have Arizona going through too. So, of the five coaches that we had kind of on our super suspect list, I've got three of those five coaches figuring out how to coach in March this year for some reason. But I think that North Carolina Arizona game will be a lot of fun to watch. I do think Carolina should be real careful with the winner of Mississippi State and Michigan State. One, Michigan State has played a bunch of top 25, top 10 teams within 2 or 3 points this year. And then Mississippi State with Chris Jans and what he's kind of doing there. Tulu Smith is a really good player. Josh Hubbard's a really good player, and they play really excellent defense. Be really careful with that round of 32 game, Hubert Davis. Otherwise, you may not find yourself having the R.J. Davis, Caleb Love game in the Elite Eight.
I saw a stat that Izzo hasn't gone more than 5 years without making an appearance in a Final Four, and his last appearance was 2019. So things that make you go,
Yeah, AJ Hogar, Tyson Walker, Malik Hall, and then yeah, you have a coach who actually is knows how to do his job really well, and on top of being able to recruit and has had success in the tournament before. I think both of those teams are a pretty tough draw for UNC in that second round game.
and then the East region.
Yeah, last one. I think UConn's been the best team in basketball all year. I think they continue to be the best basketball team. Uh, this year, Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, Caravan, Klingon. I mean, if there's guys who could go match up with that Purdue team that you've talked about really well, and I'll basically spoil it by saying I have UConn over Purdue is Klingon going against Edie, and then basically just a better slasher shooter, 3-4 combo, and then a slightly better backcourt with UConn. And I think again maybe just a slightly better coach too, and Dan Hurley, who kind of went through some interesting things early on in his career, made his way to UConn, had an interesting start to UConn, and now has the ability to go win a second national championship in a row. I just think they're again the best team in college basketball this year. And could they slip up? Yes, but if I'm just looking at percentages, it's probably my top pick to have UConn winning in most of my brackets.
I'm gonna hold on my champion until we talk to Ryan because I want to hear his stuff.
That's fair.
But I do have UConn coming out of this one as well. I think there's going to be an intimidation factor with UConn that I saw, quite frankly, last year in the tournament. It's sometimes, I mean, they didn't play a close game in the tournament. I mean, I think their closest one of their closest game, maybe the round of the 32 game, whoever they played last year, but they were one of the more dominant teams I've seen go through the tournament, and you can make an argument that they're better this year. The argument could be made, especially with the talent that you mentioned. A Castle that's going to be going to NBA talent back there. Like they've got, they played it. It came out of a loaded Big East conference where they're tested. I think there's an intimidation factor when you play UConn because of how well they execute. They remind me a lot of the Denver Nuggets in the NBA, where just team ball. They're gonna run their stuff and they're gonna run it well, very well coached. They're not gonna beat themselves, and they got a bunch of talent. That's tough to deal with, and they have length.
Yeah,
So
and they've got some interesting matchups geography wise too. They play, at the Barclays Center their first two games, and then they get to go up to Boston. So they're going to have basically those first four games as home games for the Connecticut faithful. I think the one thing that they can struggle with is very similar to what Purdue struggles with: drop coverage with Klingon, and how they're just unable to move very well. So if you get a John L. Davis or Boo Booey in the next round, be careful in that round of 32 game if they just go absolutely nuts for 30 or something like that. But besides that, I don't see very many matchup problems that they have, and they just run their sets so well on the offensive side of the floor that they're getting so many open shots and just typically convert. Um, so again, they're just a great basketball team.
let's talk about our big, dumb, fun team, the Texas Longhorns. I'm gonna ask you. I'm just gonna throw some questions at you. Did we
Let's do it.
deserve to have a 17?
No, I had us at an 8-9 game. I didn't really know which one we were going to be. I was really surprised that we got a 7 seed. I think that sets up a lot better than having to go play at Purdue, which I thought we were going to be there. Um, but again, I think you look at someone like Max Asmus and you look at someone like Dylan Dessou. It's a team that could go have a big run. Do I think in that same run they could go give up another 15-point run the other way? Absolutely, because they don't play very good defense this year. Um, but you do have guys who can go fill up the score sheet as well. So I thought the 7 seed was probably one or two over what we probably deserved, especially losing to K State in the Big 12 tournament in the first round. But um, you know, who knows? I do think we should probably easily beat a Tony Bennett Virginia team that did not deserve to be in the tournament. And I also think we should probably beat a Colorado State team who was ranked in the top 25 for a lot of the year, but doesn't have the same, I would say, offensive talent that we kind of have right now.
And they're a little bit more up and down, like we are in terms of getting up the floor. Colorado
Yep.
State, whereas we know what Virginia is, they're going to try to limit possessions. So we're just talking about that as of right now of the recording. We do feel as though so this is my expectation for Rodney Terry and the crew. I as a Texas fan, I need you to win at least the first round game because the Tennessee once you get to the Tennessee game, all the pressure is on Rick, right? Like, I'm not expecting Texas to beat Tennessee on paper, but it's Rick, and we can have a Texas USC situation from the KD days where you just smoke a game, and like you said, the thing that Texas does have inside outside offensive firepower with Dylan Dessou and Max Aidness, they can get you up out of there for one game. We're very inconsistent. If we had to play a Virginia, I could see us all of a sudden adjusting to their pace and smoking the game too in the first round. I also could see us jumping on them and not giving up a lead because Virginia is going to struggle to come back. But that's how Jekyll and Hyde this basketball team is that Texas has. But my expectation, my goal for this team, and I think it would be it'd be similar to what Chris Beard did his first year, where he won his first round game against a pretty hot Virginia Tech team at the time, and then they ran into a Purdue, Jaden Ivey and Needy
Yeah.
and those guys. All right, it was understandable.
Yeah, yeah,
Have the
no,
pressure on Rick Barnes. That's
yeah,
all I'm saying.
no, I agree with you. And to give some context there, it's halftime in the Virginia Colorado State game. Virginia has 14 points at halftime and didn't score in the last 9 minutes and 20 seconds of the first half. So it's likely that we play Colorado State just based on kind of what I'm looking at halftime right now, which I think is basically avoiding basketball terrorism with watching a Tony Bennett Virginia team this year. But Isaiah Stevens, who's Allen, Texas, born and raised, really, really good guard for Colorado State. I think him and Max should be a fun matchup to watch as well. So, him and Joel Scott and Dylan Dessou kind of playing against each other would be an interesting first round matchup. My expectation is you go win one game, and you go put all the pressure on Rick Barnes in March and see what happens in that round of 32 game on what would be Saturday.
And I think overall, it was an up and down season for Texas. So, I think a little disappointing for RT in his true year one or year one and a half, however you want to justify it. He did show They did show that they could adjust well in the tournament last year, and they handled the tournament well for where they were before the Dessou injury. Dylan Dessou is the one where I'm like, if Texas wants to be, if we really want to make some noise and get to the second weekend, if I get the Dylan Dessou I got last year in the tournament, that was putting up historic numbers and looking like Nikola Jokic in the mid post, watch out, right? Like, so there is some upside with Texas. Is I know we talk about the inconsistencies and the frustration and the fact that they don't defend with energy for 40 minutes the way you'd like to see with their talent. Dylan Dessou is the one guy that I'm like, if he doesn't get in foul trouble, the way he played against other teams that weren't used to seeing a big like him offensively, I think that could get really, really interesting. Any other final notes or parting thoughts there on Texas?
No, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with consistent inconsistency. I'm not really going into this March for as a Texas fan, as a Texas grad, with much expectation. I think it's going to try to be emotionally enjoy the basketball game without just losing my mind like I have most of this year. But we'll see. It's always an enjoyable experience to have a team in the tournament. Not everybody gets to have that experience, so can't take it for granted and just go out and enjoy all day of watching basketball. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
I will be pissed if they smoke the game though against Colorado State.
Yes, yeah,
I will
no,
be
I will
pissed.
too.
So uh, the, I know the expectations are low, but they ain't that low. Just
Agreed.
y'all listening out there. Colin, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's time to dance and get these games on. I'm gonna let you go back to watching, the early games here. But thank you for joining, man. I really, really appreciate you, brother. And we'll get Ryan and Austin and the crew back on here to talk some ball next week. We're going to the Sweet 16.
Anytime, man. And enjoy talking and enjoy March, everybody.
Thanks, folks. Hit that like button, share, subscribe. This is your official March Madness preview here at Fanatic Perspective. And remember, for our Texas fans out there, horns always up.